let's continue. We're going to look at the second tier now, which is activity. And it's tempting to see this tier. So let's say we've got everybody to attend. We used our Swiss cheese model. We stacked our slices up and we have 90% plus attendance, which is great. That gives us the opportunity to create a large total impact. And when we get to activity, when someone's actually interacting with our e-learning course or actually in the class, it's tempting to see this and say, all right, I'm going to design something with maximal interactivity, and I'm going to make sure that people have fun and are engaging in some way doing something. The problem with that is that the more fun people are having, the less they're learning. To some extent, that's true. Real learning is hard. It hurts a little bit. And so we need to be really thoughtful about the actual activities we're trying to boost. And in this section, I'd like to review the 5 tactics we found to be most effective for boosting activity, but also doing so in a way that aligns with learning objectives and gets people to, down the road, change their behavior in a way that matters to the organization and not just do something fun in a class. So the first part of this is just setting the expectation that active participation by everybody is the norm. For example, at the beginning of every hone class, we have our house agreements, which are, among other things, to keep your video on and to be an active participant. And with very few exceptions, just about every learner in every organization agrees to do this, even though there may be an organizational culture to lurk in the meeting with your video off on mute, eating a sandwich. That might be fine for some meetings, but in a learning experience is not a meeting. And setting the expectation and being pretty firm about it and seeing that everybody else is doing it is really valuable. That's another way of actually ensuring attendance. So just because someone shows up to the class, or just because someone shows up to clicks the link in the e-learning, as somebody mentioned, it doesn't mean that they're going to actually participate in any way. They might just skip ahead to the question. So we want them, this is another way of guaranteeing some kind of scale, right? So we want people to be focused and attentive and not multitasking. And once we have people's expectation that they're going to be participating, there are a few different things that you can have them do that we found to be really effective. One tactic is to have people brainstorm individually and then discuss as a group. So the question might be, based on what we've learned today, how might we apply it to our team this quarter? And you can send people off to a Figma board or a Jamboard or a Miro board. There are lots of different tools. I think Jamboard is free and is something that Google has. We like to use Figma. And then you bring people together to discuss. And when people brainstorm aloud as a group, it's easy to want to state your idea and then start defending it. Like, oh, I think we should do this because X, Y, Z. But if you can quietly see other people's better ideas or better articulations of your own ideas, you can +1 them and be a part of the winning coalition, which feels really good. Sometimes it feels better than having everybody hear your idea and say how smart you are for your unique idea. Likewise, if you have people brainstorm in a breakout room and come up with ideas, it's easy for 1 or 2 people to dominate the conversation. So having people split off for a few minutes, do some individual work, and then discussing as a group is really effective. And normally you wouldn't think about this as a learning tactic, but again, it makes sense for certain kinds of activities. So based on what we've learned today, how might we apply this? That's probably a good use of time. The next tactic is to get coaches specifically to lead high impact group exercises. So all the facilitators at Hone are certified coaches, and that enables us to do things like have leadership teams assess their psychological safety, and the resulting conversations are not necessarily easy. Like when you have a bunch of leaders get together and assess the psychological safety of their group, there might be some difficult conversations that come out of that, but they're extremely valuable. And if you have an effective coach there who can help guide the conversation, ask questions, address blockers or challenges as they come up and so on, that's going to be really valuable. And your typical facilitator who's used to presenting or like guiding exercises is not going to be best equipped for that kind of high impact activity that might get into some sensitive stuff, but is still really valuable specifically because it gets into things that really matter that people might not actually talk about outside of the context you're presenting to them. Another really valuable tactic is to facilitate independent practice, or even better, get people to do actual work. So generally, no more than 5 minutes at a time, meaning right now you're going to do, and we're going to do this together, actually. I'm going to have you do an exercise later on for 4 or 5 minutes. You're going to go into your workbook and you're going to do some work. And if you spend more than 10 minutes doing it, generally people start to lose their momentum and they start checking their emails or something. So 10 minutes might be the max that you would allow for individual work at a given time. But you can drive enormous value by getting people to immediately apply what they're learning to actual works. For example, in this screenshot here, this is from our class on developing differentiated strategy. And we have everybody in that class do what's called a TOES analysis. It's a more sophisticated version of a SWOT analysis that's better geared towards strategy. And people spend 10 minutes doing this, and then they discuss it with other leaders. And everybody does it versus begging people after the class to please do this, right? You're not going to get so much uptake. But if you put it right in the middle of the live experience or in the asynchronous experience, in order to actually continue, you have to fill out this TOES analysis. You have to actually do the work. That's a great way to get people to be active in a way that very likely aligns with learning objectives and gets them to apply something valuable. The last tactic before I'd like to hear from all of you is to get people to reflect together in small groups, which is really bread and butter of a lot of what we do. It's something we're going to do in a moment. In fact, this screenshot is a screenshot of the breakout room that you're all going to be doing at the end of today's session. Typically, if a home class is an hour long, 25 to 30 minutes of that is taken up by breakout rooms followed by debriefs. And a breakout can be totally useless if you're just getting people to chat about whatever it is. But if you're having them reflect together on a prompt that's related to what they're learning about, or giving and receiving feedback to each other. So they just did some individual work. Now you go into breakouts and you compare each other. You compare the work that you did. That's specifically what we'll be doing. Coaching people, collaborating on a task together. These are all great uses of time in breakout rooms. Generally, our breakouts are like 8 to 12 minutes long with groups of 2 or 3. Groups of 2 are great if you're talking about more sensitive information. In some of our DEIB classes, we have people stick to 2 groups because those conversations are a little bit more intimate. In other conversations, you want to have groups of 3 or 4 just to get a more diverse set of opinions about a particular challenge. And then after every breakout, we do debriefs. How did that go? What did you notice that you had in common? What are your challenges still? And so building in time for that is also really important. Yeah, Leah mentions often learning sessions don't leave enough time for self-reflection. Yeah, both individually or like after some kind of group work. One way to think about these tactics or to help make sure that you're using enough of them is if you're using slides, you can go on grid view and just look overall, where are the points of interaction? You should aim for a point of interaction every 3 to 5 minutes. If you're thinking about e-learning, like e-learning in itself is very interactive, but maybe somebody has to sit and watch like a long video, that's probably a bad idea. So I would say if you're going to be doing e-learning, probably something more like micro-learning, where you have like short videos followed by short bits of application in between each video is probably a good idea, and a way of kind of replicating that same flow that you would get in a learner experience in an asynchronous experience, a live learning experience in an asynchronous experience.